important is the chemistry between these two, and how did you know you would have it?
Well, you don't. I mean, and you said something really interesting the other day, is that you don't even, I mean, you can feel it between you, but you don't know that it's necessarily been captured. I mean, that's your responsibility. And so, yeah, it's something you just have to take that gamble on. But, I mean, I've long admired Rooney's choices as an actress, and not only the types of roles, but the choices she makes internally within a character. And so I thought, there's potential.
It's about, situations. Yeah. And that starts with the novel, and that comes through the beautiful adaptation that I first read of Phyllis's. But words, they don't have a language for the feelings that they're experiencing. And that's true for this particular historical moment. It's true for lesbians in the 50s, clearly. But it's also, when I read it for the first time, I just felt like that's true for anybody who's falling in love and who is in Therese's shoes, is you feel like, it's unclassifiable what you're feeling. And no one's ever been there before you, and that you're inventing it as you go along. And so there was something both intensely specific about that, but also incredibly universal about that. And I just thought that was such a beautiful idea. So we really went with it, and I feel like everybody was on the same page about a level of restraint and understatement. And that's true all the way through to the score, where I really feel like discussions that you and I had about the score and different themes that you would bring to me at different stages, we kept realizing that some of the simplest, most understated melodic elements in the film ultimately had the most impact.
But it sounds like the score was kind of crucial to filling in some of those gaps as well, the silences and the feelings.
Well, it's a great canvas for a composer because of all of the space and because so much is unsaid. It still leaves the question, how much does the music want to say about what's going on? Mostly, I try not to get ahead of the actors, or the characters, of what they're feeling and experiencing, and but still, treat it very subjectively from their point of view.
And also, there's a scene toward the end where you really build to an amazing crescendo. Was that a tough one for you?
Well, of course, at that point we'd already built so much structure, that if that didn't work, it meant something had been wrong earlier on. Honestly, but it's a great moment, and it was handed to me by Phyllis and by Todd by not having any dialogue in the climax of the movie. It's an amazing opportunity, and the way Todd has chosen to end it with the cut to black is very bold, and I tried to be as bold in the scoring.
So one of the things that goes on is that the sex scene is a very crucial kind of thing, and you're very restrained there. And talk about the delicacies of making that work and how important it was to the film.
Well, it's, the restraint is important, but it also had to be a culminative, shifting moment in the movie. And the film is, in many ways, although it falls outside the mystery writing or the thriller oeuvre of Patricia Highsmith's other novels, it is a suspense film in that you're waiting to see how and when this desire and this love could ever be consummated, and how that could happen at this particular time historically, and what are the rules and what are the guidelines, and what's going to happen on the road when they're sort of freed from their respective worlds.
In the film, I pushed the notion of Abby's involvement in Carol's life even further than the novel had, in terms of the bonds between women. Female friendship is very important to this, and the way that the women help each other. They are isolated, but they're isolated together in their own ways, in this incredibly poignant and repressive environment.
So Cate and Rooney, what kind of research did you do into the rules of the period and the ways that your characters were locked down and inhibited by those rules?
Well, obviously, it's a Highsmith, and this time the criminal act is the love between the women, and that existed then and doesn't exist in most English-speaking countries and most of the Western world. at the moment. So that's a huge difference. And like any great drama, you need a big impediment, you know, to get over, and that certainly was one. But I found whenever you're investing in the period, you don't want it to be locked. Its meaning to be locked up solely as a museum piece. And what I really loved was when we got to Cincinnati and really got down to with Todd, is that he really introduced the female gaze of the 50s and all these hitherto unknown to me female photographers. So we were looking at the 50s from a female perspective, a lot of whose work was buried. And Vivian Meyer, coincidentally at the time we were shooting that wonderful documentary which was nominated, had just been released about her, and it was wonderful material to watch in relation to this. So it was to me, it was looking at the 50s with an entirely different lens, a very sort of emotional, personal, romantic, but tumultuous lens, and like life in reflection, you know, in New York. So
It's also hard for us to realize how much fear there was there then, and the kind of what were these two characters afraid of?
I'm not sure exactly what Therese was afraid of. I mean, I don't know that she was afraid of things in society necessarily. I think she was afraid of continuing her life on the path that she was on, because I think she, you know, at the start of the film, she has this boyfriend who seemingly is perfect and a group of friends and this job, but she feels very much alone in her life and very unfulfilled. And so I think she's afraid of sort of letting herself go down that road because it's sort of the easier path.
I think like all great love stories, will ceases to be part of it. You're compelled for reasons that you're not entirely conscious of to move towards someone. It's like you're being pushed by an invisible force, which is part of the thrill and part of the terror, you know, of it.
They both characters say at two different points in the film, "I'm not afraid," and I think that what you're afraid of when you're in love, when you're in the dark, is that the other person doesn't feel the same way in return. But once you learn that they do, then you're no longer afraid of anything.
What they're not afraid of is their sexuality, which is radically different from most of the literature of the period, the pulp fiction and the lesbian literature that preceded it. And that was one of the things that I think attracted all of us. Also the notion of motherhood and what makes a responsible, proper mother was something that certainly fascinated me. And it seemed very forward-thinking of Pat Highsmith to come up with these things in the early 50s.
So I'm also fascinated by the looks that the two of you put together with costume designer Sandy Powell. So Carol is so glamorous and so beautiful, and that must have been really fun to put together. But were women of her class like that every day, that beautiful, that elegant, that put together?
I think life was slower, so you had time for a better blow dry. But we talked about it a lot because, as Todd said, the first section of the film, Carol's is an object of desire, and so you wanted to create this sort of mysterious, unknowable, ambiguous object of desire. It was almost impenetrable, so that you then could break through the carapace of that to sort of find out what was underneath, and that the cracks were in fact quite large. And I love the fact that, you know, sort of as a metaphor, the fur coat that we decided was the one to use was continually falling apart. And, you know, we only had one. And that's a testament to Sandy, is that she is, I mean, she's in my opinion, she's the Edith Head of her day, but there she was, between every take, personally sewing up the coat. You know, she's no job too small.
Rooney, you put together this fabulous gamine look, which some of us think is Audrey Hepburn, but maybe it's Jean Simmons. Tell us what you put together there.
It's Rooney Mara.
That's right.
Well, I didn't put it together. That was all Sandy. Costumes are always super important to me, and I usually am very loud and opinionated about them, but there was no need for that with Sandy. I don't think there was one thing I went in and tried on that didn't feel right for it. Yeah, Therese's clothes are very different from Carol. She does not have time for a better blow dry. you know, they're very loved, very worn in. She doesn't have that many pieces, so we mixed and matched things, and I think my clothes, they were not as refined, but they were much more comfortable.
But an audience starts to read meaning, obviously, as soon as a character walks on screen. And, I mean, there's many, many impediments to the women consummating their desire for one another. And a large one was the socioeconomic difference. And so we wanted to visually, obviously, represent that.
And also mark the change that Rooney makes as a character, that she literally is growing up in front of your eyes through the course of this film and transforming.